Welcome to Agile Coaches Corner by AgileThought, the podcast for practitioners and leaders seeking advice to refine the way they work and pave the path to better outcomes. Now, here's your host, coach, and Agile expert, Dan Neumann.
Welcome to the Agile Coaches Corner podcast, and thank you for joining. I am Dan Neumann. One of our goals here is to bring you Agile topics in a really approachable way. And we take a pretty broad view of what an Agile topic might be. So I'd invite you to, if you have a topic you want as a future episode, send us an email at podcast@agilethought.com or tweet it to us with the hashtag AgileThoughtPodcast, and we will see about responding to that in the very near future. Today's topic is going to be retrospectives, and with me again is my colleague, Sam Falco.
Hello, Dan.
Hey, Sam. Thanks for joining here. We
No problem.
called a little audible on what we were doing, and so we are covering retrospectives today. For me, where some of the retrospective stuff started, I was at an Agile conference down in Orlando, and at lunchtime, there was a round table with a little sign that said Diana Larsen, and I was like, oh, I wonder who that is. And so several years ago, I had a chance to sit down and meet Diana, and that was before I knew about the great book, Agile Retrospectives, that Diana Larsen and Esther had put together. And for me, that's one of those touchstone books that is used so much in the Agile industry, and it seems like everybody after them has built upon that topic. I don't know, Sam, how are you seeing things?
Well, I have personally bought 5 copies of that book. I keep giving them away. I bought one for my first copy for myself. Someone was looking through it, said, hey, could I borrow this? So it was less a giveaway than I loaned it, and it didn't come back to me. And then I bought another copy for myself, gave that to someone at my next company when I left, and then et cetera. So yeah, I think I'm on my 5th copy now.
You're far more generous than I am. I have my copy. It's dog-eared and sticky noted all over the place. So nobody's getting it. One of the things I like about the book Agile Retrospectives, Making Good Teams Great, is that it provides a structure. A lot of teams right now will often do what's working, what's not, and what do we want to do different. And within the Agile Retrospectives book, it has a 5-step process of setting the stage, gathering data, then you generate insights, decide what to do, and close the retrospective. And I really like that lightweight framework.
Yeah, I like that as well. It's important to have a structure. And if you skip any of those stages, you miss something, especially the set the stage, which sometimes people feel like that is just frippery. You can do without it. Just dive right in. I had a director of engineering at one company I was at who didn't understand why we needed so much time for retrospectives. And he insisted on sitting in on one of my team retrospectives. Literally would have had to carry him out of the room to say, no, you can't be here. And he afterward just was appalled at the little set the stage exercise that I did because, well, why didn't you just start talking about the problems? And we talked about it quite a bit, and he finally came to understand that setting the stage, that initial thing, is important. It's actually imperative in moving people out of I'm focused on the problem that I'm trying to solve to deliver software to I'm focused on the team and how we're going to work together. So it makes a nice transition, makes a crucial transition into that mindset that we need for effective retrospectives.
Agreed. There's the mindset of getting people focused on the problem. And it even solves some of the simple mechanics, like getting somebody to say something in a meeting.
Right.
Like, if you jump right into the problem, and we'll talk about some of the anti-patterns, you get the first talker who's typically anchors the conversation on the thing that they most want to talk about, whether it's the most important thing or not. And then a lot of times you stay there and other people maybe check out either explicitly or implicitly. They don't contribute. And so even just some of the set the stage activities of getting people to say something then makes it more likely that they're going to talk later on.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, I just remembered my high school chemistry teacher would start class with what's in the news today. Had nothing to do with chemistry. he just, and I had asked him at one point, why do we start with this? It's not related to what we're talking about. I have social studies class, next period. And well, no, but I want to get people in the habit of speaking up in class. So same concept.
That's cool. Life lessons from high school. That's awesome. When you say so much time, I'm curious what amount of time you might be referring to there, because I've also heard people say, oh, these things take so much time. And I'm curious if you can quantify the typical time box you need for, let's say, a retrospective on a 2-week sprint.
Well, a retrospective on a 2-week sprint is up to 90 minutes. I have done them successfully with a mature team. I always hate to use the word mature because it sounds... I don't know. It sounds a little odd, but
a little judgy.
Yeah, a team that is well practiced. I've done them in less time, not half an hour, an hour. But any shorter than that for a 2-week retrospective, and people's gears start to grind. They're trying to, we've got to get it down to a very short time. And I said half an hour a minute ago because one of my team said, hey, could we try doing a retrospective in a half an hour? And I said, let's give it a shot. And afterwards, we did a mini retro on the retro, and they're like, man, that they got so focused on we've got to be out of here in half an hour that it shut down conversation. So I'm not saying you have to take the full 90 minutes, but find a good length of time for the team and let them be guided on that. Give themselves their own guidance, I suppose is what I mean.
Yeah, one of the anti-patterns I see is the too short retrospective. And that typically has a death spiral that looks like, well, pick a time box. We used to take an hour and they weren't effective. And so we cut it down to half an hour and we weren't getting effective change. And so we're down to 15-minute retros because they're not effective.
Right.
Instead of cutting the time, maybe find a way to make them effective. And
right.
Cutting the time isn't going to do it.
Right. Yeah. Then you need to retro on the retro. Why aren't we getting the value? It's not because we're spending too much time. And it might not be that we're not spending enough time. It might be that we're just not focused. But yeah, frequently people reach for the first obvious answer, which is, well, we spent an hour on this. It's not giving us any value, but we have to do it because the Scrum Guide says we must. So we'll just sacrifice without really getting into what it is we're trying to accomplish here and how we can get the value that we're looking for.
And I agree, don't do them because the Scrum Guide says to, but if you look at the Scrum principles of transparency, inspection, and adaptation, you've got to do that.
Oh, absolutely.
Otherwise, you're not going to embrace the empirical nature of Scrum. And the retrospective is a great framework for doing that. So the why isn't because Scrum says so. The why is because
absolutely. And I didn't mean to imply otherwise. But a lot of times teams will just go through the motions because it's in the Scrum Guide. Scrum says we have to do this. And if we don't do everything, we're not doing Scrum, but they don't look at the why does the Scrum Guide say you should do retrospectives, and it goes beyond Scrum. Obviously the 12th principle in the Agile Manifesto list of principles is at regular intervals, the team reflects on how to become more effective, then tunes and adjusts its behavior accordingly. Has nothing specifically to do with Scrum. That's just what a team must do to continue being effective.
That's fantastic. So that might be part of setting the stage as well, is the why you're there. And then gathering data. I feel like a lot of times teams don't bring data. Or if they do, it's the subjective data. My personal experience with whatever the situation was that happened that sprint. Are there data points that you've seen be effective?
How do you mean?
I think for me, one of them, let's say if a team wants to pair more frequently, let's track that and bring some data to the retrospective about how often we're pairing. If they're concerned about code quality, some static analysis tools that can give you an actual objective measure of code quality, the complexity of the structure, bring that. It's not just, gosh, the code's getting hard to maintain, or we have too many bugs, or our velocity is down, those type of really basic things.
Right. Well, I mean, if those come up and during the course of the retrospective, you realize, we want to improve this, but we don't know how because we don't have the data, then maybe your improvement action item for that sprint is, hey, let's go get the data on how we've been doing so that we bring it into the next retrospective.
Definitely. We did a podcast a little while back with Adam Mullery about experimental mindset. And
right,
that pairs really well with the retrospective, because now we'll gather some data, we'll decide what we want to do about it after generating insights. And then the question is, how do you measure the impact of what you want to do, and framing that up as an experiment? Hey, we have a hypothesis. Here's the action we're going to take to either try and prove or disprove that. And then what data can we collect about the impact? And either way you win, because it's learning. I like putting the experimental mindset with this.
Absolutely. I find that teams do come into retrospective with data, sometimes too much and too disparate, especially if you are, if the team is used to the complaint session style, where nothing, they come in and they've got a litany of complaints. It's like Festivus, where the airing of grievances begins. So some teams don't lack for data, they lack for focus. And so what I will usually do is try to get a feel for what's going on with the team over the course of the sprint, and I try not to anchor them too much, but ask questions that lead them to focusing on what happened this sprint that is most important right now.
And I don't necessarily think that's a bad kind of anchoring, because you do want to set the stage. You do want to put some kind of constraint around the conversation. Yes, the time box is one, but to have a sprint or two where, maybe the theme of those couple sprints retrospectives is on engineering practices, or collaborating with the customer, or faster feedback, or whatever may be most appropriate, because we do have short feedback cycles. So let's take a sprint or two. Let's focus in on this particular theme and make some changes and gather some feedback on that. Right. Yes, as opposed to anchoring, I think of is really overweighting the first thing that somebody says. So if you've got that person who comes in and they've got their little pet peeve that they always want to talk about, and it's hard to move off of that. That's how I see it. So yeah, so you frame it up in a particular way.
Yeah.
So generating insights is one of those activities that once you have the data, it's now what might that be telling us, and allowing kind of a more open-ended or a broader exploration of what we might be seeing in that data.
Right.
I think for me, generating insights, it's you've got things like 5 whys and some different activities to start digging down beyond the superficial. We've got too many bugs. Well, what should we do? We should code fewer bugs. Well, okay. And how might we go about that? Like, how do we go deeper than just the superficial? We should take the action to not do the thing that's a problem.
Right. And the generate insights goes beyond just, okay, let's code fewer bugs. But so we've got, our quality has dropped. What's going on with that? As you said, the 5 whys. What are some factors that can explain this behavior or might be affecting it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the issue with quality might be coming from, you might have a skill set from a developer that needs some attention. They might be skimping on things like unit tests. They might be relying too much on documentation instead of going and tapping the product owner on the shoulder for clarification, or collaborating with the QA person, because time zones. There's so many more options for what might be causing that data to be suboptimal than what you would think of at first. So then, of course, you have to decide what to do.
It sounds obvious, but a lot of teams don't get to that step. And I know when I was beginning as a Scrum Master 10 years ago, one of the things we realized was that our sessions, we never came up with a recommendation for what to do next. And no, there was no accountability. It was just a gripe session. We might come up with some things, but there was no accountability, no way to follow up on them. So we just tended to cycle through a lot of things over and over again. And I think, and this was before I discovered Esther Derby's book, we were missing that. We were gathering data, we were generating maybe some minimal insights, but without any understanding of what we were supposed to do with those insights. They were shallow, and we didn't get very far. It was just let's sit around and gripe for 90 minutes.
That's interesting, because the pattern I see more often is that people just come up with too many things. So like, here's the 15 things we want to do, which dilutes the focus and creates an unattainable expectation for how much change people are going to have. So yeah, there's we're not going to change anything, or we're just venting and complaining. Yeah. And then here's the
laundry list of our complaints. Someone do something about this.
Right. Yeah. Or the laundry list of things that the team maybe really does intend to do, but they also have day jobs and they're trying to also deliver software products. And so as opposed to focusing it on one thing.
Yeah. A fascinating thing I saw in one team was I had them, I had come in to the organization I was at, and this team was doing pretty well when I came in. But one of the things that each of them said when I did a one-on-one with them was, we don't seem to have any effective results from our retrospectives. We come up with stuff and it doesn't get done. And so the next retrospective I ran with them, we got to the end, and I had them narrow it down to 3 things, because they did tend to pick too many. And I said, okay. And I read the first one. And I said, who wants to be accountable for making sure this happens? It was dead silence. I said, okay. I moved to the second one. And what it basically boiled down to was they all thought these were great ideas. Nobody wanted to actually do them. Or they wanted somebody else to do it. And it was because they felt overworked. And so we were running out of room and running out of time, and our room was about to be invaded by another team. But we had to do a mini retro on the retro right there and say, okay, so the real problem is not all the stuff we came up with, is how do we make sure that we've got time in our schedules to be able to improve, and we had to solve that problem before we could get to some of the other problems.
There's a fable, I suppose, is the most accurate description of the mice who are sitting around having a complaint session about the cat. And like, if only the cat had a bell, like, so we knew when the cat was coming, then we could all escape, right? And then the one mouse says, yes, but who will bell the cat? And it's one of those things, where the team's like, okay, we have a problem and a solution, but it's not actionable. Which is another, I think, anti-pattern I see where people maybe have their hands tied or feel like their hands are tied.
Right. And sometimes that's true. Sometimes what can come out of a retrospective is we have this problem and it is outside of our scope of control. And that's fine. What I do in those situations is, as a Scrum Master, of course, then that's something I need to take action on. Identify the things, but ask them, so what is within your scope of control that you'd like to do differently? Is there an experiment you'd like to try? And sometimes framing it in terms of, it's not necessarily that we're doing something wrong that we need to fix, but just something we want to try and see if it makes things better. Absolutely.
The other thought that comes to mind with things that are in our control, or trying to get people to look at what's in their control, is maybe that change right now is outside your control because nobody cares about it, because they don't see the impact of it. So what can you do to build some kind of case, or gather some data, or make the pain caused by that situation more obvious, so that eventually, maybe in a sprint or a month or a quarter or a year, there's enough impetus for making that change, I think, is the other thing that I could see working well.
Have a topic you want us to tackle? Send an email to podcast@agilethought.com or tweet it with the hashtag AgileThoughtPodcast.
Last part of the framework that's in the Agile Retrospectives books is closing the retrospective. I know there are some activities like appreciations, so sharing appreciation for your other teammates, and I think that's a nice positive way to close. Are there some notions for closing that come to mind for you that you've seen be effective?
So I want to echo what I said about the initial stage, is that closing the retrospective is about getting people back into the mindset of, okay, I got to go code some stuff, or actually I got to go prepare for sprint planning. But yeah, I like the appreciations, especially if there has been some contention or some real hard work that has been done because of interpersonal conflicts. Sometimes, especially if the team has had a brutal sprint where they got beat up, appreciation can also help because, hey, we are good at what we do, and we are gonna, we're gonna lick this and give them a positive way of ending it. And another thing I have done with retrospectives is ask for feedback for me as a facilitator. How was this for you? Was this a good use of your time? And if not, what could I have done differently? So that can be a way of getting them out of the retrospective by having them give me the feedback so that the next retrospective will be better.
Yes, the return on time invested, or kind of high points or low points of the retrospective.
Yeah,
definitely valuable. One of the things I think I'm surprised about, so 2 years ago, going on 3 years ago, is when I realized that this book by Esther and Diana was over a decade old. It was just actually turning a decade old. I think it was published in 2006. And while there have been some new things, I don't feel like there's a ton of new structures that people are employing around the retrospective. So some new tools, some new ways to maybe to do gathering data, the generating insights, deciding what to do. Have you seen anything that's really got you excited from a framework perspective?
Not really. I think that 5-step process framework, however you want to call it, is psychologically sound. Now, it would be interesting to see if there was some psychological research around how that could be improved. I don't know. But no, I have not seen anybody do anything different as far as the basic structure that made me say, you know what, that is cool. That is really effective. I've seen some things that were tucked in there. There was a tool, and I've forgotten the name of it, but one of the things that it did was it archived your last retrospective, and it started with, how well did you actually do in your last retrospective as far as following up? It would say, these are the things you decided. Did you do them? Rate it 1 to 10. And so you would very quickly get oh, hey, we're actually not following up on these things, highly visible. But that was simply part of the set the stage. It wasn't another stage.
Makes sense. And that brings up a good point. One of the ways to help teams actually do the follow-up is to make these do difference actually very visible. So I like writing the specific thing up on the flip chart, on a flip chart within your team room, or adding it to your Scrum board as something specific, or a backlog item within the sprint. Really put out that idea and make it big and visible, and maybe even touch on it periodically as part of your daily Scrum or after your daily Scrum. Just like, are we paying attention to the thing we said was valuable during our retrospective?
Yeah, and that's why they made that change. And was the most recent Scrum Guide update, or the one before that, where they specifically said that the output of the retrospective is at least one backlog item that goes into the next sprint's backlog for the team to work on, giving that guidance for teams who maybe weren't doing it, but also giving them a little cover if you're in an organization that says, no, we only want stuff in the backlog that is product oriented. It gives Scrum Masters a way to push back and say, hey, you want us to do Scrum. This is Scrum. This is part of Scrum. And then be able to have that conversation about why it's important. So yeah, I love that idea of putting it in the backlog. Going back to my first team, once we realized we were doing these, nothing but gripe sessions, and someone asked the question, well, how can we get better at that? We had an electronic tool, but what we did was just put up in the team room, we printed out in like 72-point font, possibly bigger, just what our decision was. So there it was every day when we came in and started talking about our what we were doing that day, was also, by the way, this is what we're supposed to be paying attention to as well. And it would frequently cause that conversation to happen. Hey, are we still doing X?
It's a good way to build that accountability.
Yeah.
So within the structure, we were sharing some resources that folks might want to know about. And so one of them that you'd identified was RetroMat. So at retromat.org.
Yeah.
What would you like to add about that?
I love this tool. I stumbled upon it about 4 years ago, and it's just got a bunch of different retrospective games, but they are sorted according to the stages of the retrospective. So if you need an idea for an activity for setting the stage and you're kind of, the well is running dry, you can go there and look for just that, or all of them. And it also has a little random button. So you can just randomly generate a retrospective plan. And some of them don't work together. And some of the games are not ones I would use, but they always are thought-provoking. And I love when I'm really, like I said, when the well is dry or I need something new, go hit that random button, see what comes up. And I've come up with some really cool retrospectives as a result of that.
I do love the random button on there.
Yeah.
Right. And like you said, sometimes they won't work. I'll look at those and I'll go, ooh, boy, that's not my style.
Right.
And maybe that's something I need to get over, is my discomfort with some of those things. But you spin it again and it just gets the juices flowing on that. One of the websites that I like to go to, it's not really an Agile site per se. It's the Tyagi group. And so that's THIAGI. Is how you spell Tyagi. This man, he's a professor at Indiana University, and he creates games. For a while, he was creating a different game every day and publishing it. And yeah, some of them are better than others.
Wow!
But he has a really nice structure. He makes all those games, those activities for free. There are ones that take a long time. There are ones that he calls them. Jiggle isn't the word that he uses for them, but it's a jolt. It's a jolt, not a jiggle. So, but it's a really quick activity just to kind of get the brain flowing and get people thinking. And you can use those to not just in retrospectives, but in any other setting as well. A lot of good facilitation activities there. And then you'd also mentioned funretrospectives.com as a place you like to go to.
Yeah, it's got some activities that you can use. I don't rely on that one as much as others, but I just wanted to make sure that people were aware that it's out there and it's got some really good stuff.
And we can put that in the show notes, and folks will be able to get that at the agilethought.com/podcast, where they can go find the show notes for this.
Yeah.
Liberating structures, I think, is an interesting topic.
Yeah.
What would you like to add about liberating structures?
I was just introduced to this by Becky Hartman. It goes beyond retrospectives. It's not really a retrospective focused website. It is just different ways of getting people engaged. So frequently, one of the things we'll have to deal with is we've got introverts, we've got extroverts, and how do you get these people to engage in a productive and safe manner? And this has a lot of ways to mix up your meetings, not just retrospective, but meetings. One I like is 1, 2, 4, all. So you have some time of silent writing where people reflect on the question at hand by themselves, then they pair up, then they get in groups of 4, and then you go to the whole group. Now everybody's had a chance to get their voice heard on a small scale. Also, they may feel more comfortable moving from the pair to the quad to then the full group of speaking when they might not have been so keen on doing it before.
That is one of the structures that was mentioned by Christy Urbeck in an episode we did with her on working agreements too. And that was one that she'd also mentioned as being particularly powerful. Some people think out loud, the brain doesn't work if the mouse is not moving. And then there are people who, when other people are talking, they simply can't process, and neither one's good, bad, or better. But you need to create time for all the different thinkings. The people who think silently, the people who have noise on. Sometimes I've been in workshops or sessions where they play the music when they ask you to do a thinking exercise. My brain doesn't work that way. It's like singing along to the song instead of processing things silently and writing them down. So really being aware of the structures that people are putting in place can either help or hinder the ability to contribute. And so, liberating structures. I believe there's a mobile app for that. They've made a lot of the structures, maybe all of them, freely available.
Yeah.
So, definitely check out the liberating structures. And then for people who like kind of ebooks and things that travel well, there's a book called Getting Value Out of Agile Retrospectives.
Yeah, Luis Gonçalves, I think is its pronunciation. I don't know how the C with the Sadia is pronounced.
And I was going to say the C with the squiggly thing under it being the ugly American, right?
And Ben Linders wrote that. It derives a lot from Esther Derby's book. There's a lot of stuff that's in there that they took from Esther Derby's book. and we always say it's Esther Derby's book and forget Diana Larsen. It's from
Diana Larsen,
Derby and
yeah,
Larsen.
yeah.
But I mean, Esther Derby wrote the foreword to it, so I can't imagine that she was unhappy that they were building on what she did. But it was nice. I did, when he first was putting that out, he did a several week webinar series, and the guy I was working for at the time and I both went through that, and it had some good information in it. And yeah, it's good to have it in ebook format, I suppose.
Definitely. There was one, sometimes props, for lack of a better word, come in handy. And one of the things I wanted to share about was the Rory's story cubes. I know you're familiar with those, but for folks who aren't, they come in a little box. It's 9 cubes with little pictures on them. And I like that it can allow people to come up with something they maybe hadn't thought of. So the way we've used it in the past is, you go ahead, you roll the dice, and in this case, I got a picture of like an arrow, and so it's showing Sam here on our little webcams. But then I might think of like, how can we improve our aim within the team? So something I maybe hadn't been thinking of before, and now there's a kind of a jolt, something different to get the thinking. Or maybe are we living too dangerously trying to do the William Tell and shoot the apple off somebody's head instead of some safer alternatives?
And also they combine, so someone else gets another icon. And the way I've used them is I draw boxes on the whiteboard for each one for each person. That is, tell the story of the sprint. By taking the icon, you draw you copy it basically into the spot in the sprint where this part of the story, and people might have gotten that arrow, and someone else might have gotten, and I don't know if it's in the set you have, but there's a couple of expansions, and one that's it's like a scarab beetle. Well, the person was like, well, we had a lot of bugs, and then someone might take that arrow and say, and we slew the bugs, and this is how we did it. So it can spark a lot of different interpretations. So yeah, I love those as a technique for changing the way people think.
Absolutely. So we're going to do a bit of an experiment. We'll see if the marketing folks are listening, because we don't always ask for permission first. So what we're going to do is, for folks who either tweet with AgileThought Podcast as a hashtag and mention the story cubes, or email it to us with podcast@agilethought.com and mention story cubes in the subject line, we will look to send out a box or two of those to folks. So a bit of an experiment, and our gift to listeners, we'll randomize it somehow. I don't want it to be a race.
Right.
Some people may be working.
Something we didn't mention is I mentioned a tool that I had used, an online tool, and I don't remember the name of that one that I had been using, but retrium.com. I can't say enough good things about this tool ever since I heard about it and I've experimented with it. It's really, really good if you have distributed teams, because a lot of retrospective activities are geared towards everybody's in the same room. And well, that's in our distributed working world, that's not always true. And so I've done things with Google Docs and other online tools that don't always work the way they're supposed to. First and foremost, Retrium just works. It just works the way you want it to. They have a bunch of different templates. There's different styles of retrospectives you can run, so it's really valuable. So I wanted to give a shout out to that.
One of the things I like about Retrium that takes it beyond, let's say, a Google Doc or some other shared online thing is it will obfuscate other people's contributions until you're ready to reveal them all. So with a Google Doc, you see what everybody's typing when they're typing it. And so similar to the thinking silently or thinking out loud, it's hard to really reflect on what you want to contribute if you're reading what other people are writing as well. And so it prevents that anchoring from happening. So I love that feature
and I like that it shows you that someone is writing something, and it's just sort of blurry. So it gives you I got it. Someone's got something. I should, it kind of is a kick in the pants if you need it.
It's like sitting around the table and seeing somebody jotting on the sticky note and ripping them off. It's like, okay. Yeah. People are participating. That's a good sign. And I'm going to participate as well. So I know in a lot of episodes, in fact, I think every episode to this point, I've asked other people what they're reading. And this time I wanted to actually share something I'm reading that is loosely related to agility.
Cool.
Yeah. I just need to recall the title of it.
Okay.
It is it's called Scorecasting. And it's the hidden influences behind how sports are played and games are won. And so it really looks at the numbers and the behavior within sports. So, for instance, are umpires more or less likely to call a pitch a ball if the pitcher already has 2 strikes against the batter? Or if there are 3 balls, are they more likely to call a strike? And using a lot of the data that's now available, they can actually, within Major League Baseball, they can actually see how much a ball moves and exactly where it is with this pitch FX data. And so now they can observe the behavior of umpires, and they actually are less likely to call the 4th ball, and where they're less likely to call the 3rd strike on pitches that are identical pitches given certain scenarios. And we talk in the Agile groups a lot about, how metrics and how behavior will change unintentionally when you start putting in, let's say, goals. And when you start measuring behavior, you're going to get certain adverse effects. And it's really interesting to kind of look in the sports world and see actual measurable data, some of it which confirms assumptions like those of an umpire, and some of those that take away things like home field advantage, or really the why of the home field advantage. It's a thing, but why is it a thing?
Yeah, I just saw something recently, tangent, not pretty much on the same subject. It was that referees tend to give the benefit of the doubt to the Big Six. I watch a lot of football, soccer, and the Big Six in the Premier League in England. So, a player for Arsenal, perhaps, will do something that won't get a yellow card. The player will just get a talking to. Someone from Bournemouth, that card just comes right the heck out of the pocket. And statistically, yes, referees are more likely to card teams on the bottom of the table than they are the top of the table. And there's been similar data to show that if a player has a 1 yellow card and another yellow card will get him put out, they will be less likely to to give a yellow card for the same offense.
Absolutely, yeah. And in Major League, you can tell how much I watch it. In basketball, that NBA thing, the refs do swallow the whistle at the end of the game, and they're able to go back and look at those particular behaviors. So, so people interested in data and how it affects behavior. I like the book Scorecasting. And then you had something, Sam, I think you also wanted to add.
Yeah, I wallowed in fiction over the holidays because I've been reading so much stuff. I'm currently reading Bluebird by Attica Locke, which is a mystery novel. It won the Edgar Award for Best Mystery Novel last year, and it is so rich that I normally will blast through a book in a day or two, a novel. And I have been reading this for over a week because I keep having to stop and just think about the beauty of the prose that I have just read. So if you're a mystery novel fan, Bluebird is just a marvelous, marvelous book. I have up next, I'll be reading, I just actually got the phone call before we got on that my copy of Dare to Lead is at the library waiting for me to pick up. So that'll be my next read that Becky Hartman recommended to me.
Nice. Yeah. Brene Brown. I know that's another book that seems to be getting mentioned a lot within the Agile coaching group at AgileThought. So I think I have it downloaded, but I haven't consumed it yet. You consume it at a much more rapid rate than I do. So I look forward to hearing your Cliff's Notes version of it later.
All right.
Okay. Well, thank you, Sam, for joining today. And thanks to everybody who listened. And we'd love any feedback from folks.
This has been the Agile Coaches Corner podcast, brought to you by AgileThought. Get the show notes and other helpful tips from this episode and other episodes at agilethought.com/podcast.